Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We had a few technical issues with the captioning, but the link has now been uploaded for the captioning, so you will see that in the chat box. If you click on that link, then you should be able to see the captioning in a separate window. I am Micah. I'm an advocate with HEARD. We have with us currently, we have TL, a longtime community advocate with HEARD, and also an administrator. We have also Debbie with us. Okay, we just put the link up again for the captioning. Please let me know if you are able to see the captioning or not. Again, we have TL with us, a longtime community advocate with HEARD. She's been with them over a decade now. We also have Debbie with us. Debbie will be answering questions and about the mass incarceration. We also have with us Scott, who's also an advocate. And from one of our chapters of HEARD, and also on the board of HEARD. He does many different things for HEARD, and I'm sure that they will all expand more about themselves and what they do for us momentarily. We also have two interpreters with us. We have Jackie and Troy. You will not see those two on video. However, they will be our voice interpreters for tonight. The captioning is also separate. Like I said, a separate link. Well, let me go back and let everyone know that Debbie and TL both do not use any gender pronouns. So you can just say Debbie or TL. Scott uses he, him pronouns. And I, Micah, use they or them pronouns. Okay. So a few comments about deaf imprisonment. You know, people from all over, from different backgrounds. We have young people from who are homeschooled, educated, and just various different places. This topic is related to legal, educational, and the penal reentry for deaf people who are imprisoned. There are many things that we will touch on tonight, but I just want to let everyone know that some of the issues may be a little bit sensitive and traumatic. So if you need to step away to take a breather, please feel free to do so. For this, we do have a few questions prepared, and we will allow the panelists the time to answer those questions. I think we will begin with talking about mass incarceration. We talked about that the last two webinars, but as we know that there is an abundance of deaf people in prison and jails, and underprivileged people in large numbers. So can you share with us about the high number of deaf people in prison? Hello, this is TL here. Thank you, Micah, for introducing the panel and for setting up the technology and helping to get all these issues worked out. So first, I want to open with an explanation about the big picture, what the issues are that have been going on since about the 1970s. Since 1970, we have seen a huge increase in the number of people in our penal system. For example, back in the 1970s, we noticed there were about 300,000 people altogether in prison, and that was a nationwide number. That was federal, state, and local. Altogether, the number was totaled about 300,000. Now that number is over 2.3 million. So as you can see, I mean, in less than 30 years, we've had a 800% increase. People, and so we're trying to figure out, how did this happen? There are several reasons behind that, but we will just touch on a few of those tonight, and we would like to leave time for Scott and Debbie both to be able to address those questions as well. I'm just going to throw this out there. You know, the war on drugs, you know, if we remember that, that was the middle 70s or 80s, you know, where we noticed more people using cocaine, just different drugs, even pills. And instead of the government providing support and treatment and providing access for those individuals, they decided to punish those people with mass incarceration. Also, it's important to remember that at that time, you have to realize who were the people using drugs. You know, those were marginalized individuals. For example, people who were low income, people of color, really just, it's funny that we notice the same cycle happening today. You know, the system is very sensitive to the wealthy people. You know, right now they have a strong, we've noticed that their addiction to opioids, it's what's really plaguing that group of people. And so now everybody's seeing that happening with the wealthy people, and the approach is different now than it was before. Like I said, in the past, it was a punish them. And now that we notice this addiction happening with the wealthy people, it's more of a, oh, we need to advocate for them, we need to support them, you know, and so it's enough of that. And so we see now the discussion about death in the disabled community, you know, it's really related with access to services, mental health services, addiction support is lacking. Some of them are not provided. Interpreters, for example, in the court system, they've really failed our community. If a person, say a hearing person, they would have access to diversion programs, you know, so, okay, instead of sending you to jail, we're going to send you to therapy, we're going to send you to rehab, things of that sort. But then nationwide, we're noticing with our deaf people that when they go to court, then the judge, they won't provide an interpreter. Oh, sorry, you can't participate, so then you will go to jail. So we're noticing that those things are happening all over the country, and so that's an issue. that's just one example. There are several, and we could go on, but we'll just leave it at that as one example. And we will go into more detail at a later time.
Thank you. This is Micah signing. Thank you, TL. Thank you, TL, for your comments. Now, Scott, Debbie, would you like to touch on these issues and what you're doing for your advocacy for people imprisoned? Hello, I am Debbie. I am an advocate for her, and I've been with the group since 2014, and it's an honor to assist and support and and assist in the hotline using video phone or communication through email. Individuals whom are imprisoned themselves. You know, there are deaf and deafblind and are diverse individuals with various backgrounds. When they contact me, they ask for specific help. Most often they ask for access to contact and communicate with their lawyers. They often attempt to get in touch with their lawyers and find it very frustrating, finding that the lawyers themselves have a very limited schedule and attempting to use video phone or TTYs to communicate and not being able to get through to their lawyers, to their attorneys. So there's a limitation on communication. So they ask for assistance to link up with their attorneys and lawyers. Also, they have been frustrated with their experiences in prisons, miscommunications, feeling that the security, the guards, while they attempt to communicate with those guards through gestures and writing back and forth, there's consistent misconceptions. And they are often, set in isolation. They are placed in isolation units, which are a unique housing. And they're put in those isolation cells and left there. When they finally come out, they want to express themselves. They want to speak and communicate with others and tell them things. Another example is health care. Often their health declines and they want to communicate with their doctors, the doctors that are provided in prisons, and there are no interpreters. Or they're placed, they have interpreters placed who have minimal skills and there's not real communication. They get medication or treatment and that would be limited to them. They would not get them. So that's what they're asking for assistance with. And it's a lot more than that. Scott, I know, you can share and add to that. Hello all, I am Scott Stuffman. I live in Latonia, Louisiana. And here, I focus on the deaf and hard of hearing prisoners. I became affiliated with HERD in 2014. And since, I've learned a wealth of information. I had been incarcerated for 5 years in the past. And, there were 5 deaf guys in the dorms with me where I learned to sign. So I had firsthand experience seeing what was happening to deaf prisoners. And it was horrific. All the things that I had access to, things were easy for me. There were barriers to those fellow inmates. For example, educational classes, getting GEDs, vocational training. Alcohol Anonymous, rehab classes, self-help programs, chapel, religious services. Everyone has a right to learn about God. And the deaf were not getting access to that. So plus I also saw our guards, you know, taunting and bullying. Oh, you can read my lips. Oh, you can do this. Oh, you can talk. So they were taunted often. For example, one time a man came in to the cafeteria and the guard yelled out, "Stop, stop." And the deaf person couldn't hear him. Well, anyway, the guards all went to them and slammed them down on the ground. It was very violent. It was a bloody, violent mess. And then he was placed in isolation. Why? Because he was deaf. That truly traumatized me. It was horrific to see. So I got out in 2013. So I've been out several years. I joined HERD and learned so much from the team. They've been teaching me a great deal. I thought that maybe other states would be doing it the right way, but it's horrible to find out they're not. It's all a mess nationwide. So my point, I am here in Louisiana supporting the deaf and hard of hearing prisoners. In what ways? Setting up video phones, making sure they have access. I've set up 21 so far in our prisons. Being able to get lawyers to represent these men in prison. Helping to stop incarcerated interpreter program. To provide support to those men, those incarcerated men who surely have no family or any outside support. So it's a we, me and a team, other people in the community here in Louisiana, in TL and other states also. We video chat, we video phone each other and we communicate and we talk about these things. I mean, we can go, I can go on for days about this, but I'll cut it short and I'll pass over to TL now. Yes, thank you. I wanted to add also, another reason behind incarceration, the mass incarceration, really it's all fun. It's all about funding, money, financing. It's a lot of money tied up in prisons, in the prison system. It's not just the same old thing. Phone calls are expensive. Most people know that. But right now, prisoners can do 90 billion, the prisoners themselves collect, the prison system. The prison system each year annually collects $90 million. Billion dollars, let me be clear. Annually. And that's devastating. Especially it's a shock, especially not being able to provide interpreters for these people for $90 billion you're getting. You'll often notice that the interpreters themselves, they figure out a way to cheat the system. They earn money off the backs of deaf prisoners. Oftentimes they get poor quality interpreters that come in and take advantage and feel like, oh, you're a deaf prisoner. You can't speak up for yourself. You don't have any options anyway. I'm here. And they're also hearing people that take advantage of the deaf, set them up for the purposes of personal gain. For example, 5 years ago, a hearing guy set up a copy for video phone. Do you remember that message we did the video? We were fighting very hard to set up video phones. And we were hitting a lot of blocks. The reason why this hearing person set up something for the prison system and said, oh, you know, if you set this up, deaf people will have the same access as hearing people. They'll, you know, it's just like having a smartphone, which was untrue. It was a lie. But he himself was collecting funding from all these contracts with the prison system. And CODAs and other hearing people often take advantage from testifying, witnessing, saying, you know, saying they're supporting for the, offering support for the system, and saying that, oh, they don't need access, and collecting funding for that. Many lawyers have no idea about deaf access, the deaf community, but they want to cash in. They come in and they say, oh yeah, we'll set up a settlement. And then they run. They get their money and they go. And the deaf person is left stuck with the system. So it's a lot of dirty business that's been going on. So it's, the bottom line really is, it's all money. And we have a system that's been set up to continue going on. It's fueled by greed and money. And it's hard to stop a greedy system, something like that. Micah, you?
Hi, yes, Micah again. Thank you for really expanding on that, TL, and leading right into our next question. For the past 20 years, you've worked with the deaf people and people who are wrongly convicted and are now in prison. So can you give us an example of some of the barriers that you've seen, and how can we approach those barriers? If you could just give a quick example, if you can. So who's next? Debbie, I think it's your turn to answer first. Debbie here. TL mentioned about how the system, how people can take advantage of deaf, blind, and people who are incarcerated, and those who have a hearing loss as well. The whole gamut. The system really takes advantage of those people. I was really shocked to see and witness over and over our own community, our own organizations, those big organizations who are supposed to advocate and support the deaf, blind, deaf, disabled community. They're supposed to model to the nation how to approach the system, not take advantage of people, but those are the exact same groups who were themselves taking advantage of our community. And that was really heartbreaking for me. I mean, access, how to get support for individuals who are in prison, it's already hard enough. And now when they get out into the community, you know, they want us to help them and collaborate with them, but often those organizations, they make things more complex, or say, oh, that's not my responsibility, you know, oh, maybe you should go and file a lawsuit, you know, and then they're involved with getting the money on that end too. While the housing system, the prison housing system itself is really complex. For years and years, you have to go back and forth in between them, and then you can find a way to be able to help. But often those individuals are ignored. They're like, oh, we'll do it later. And it hurts even worse, you know, because those same people are walking around as if they are the experts on the topic, you know, and they get all the national attention, you know, but it's really hurting those deaf prisoners. You know, they're protesting to get laws passed and, you know, that kind of thing. I'm a volunteer and an advocate for HERD, and I have witnessed those types of things over and over. And like I said, I mean, it's just really heartbreaking. It's not okay. You know, it's time for us to call out our own too. We need to make a change in our own community as well. You know, so time is up for that. Scott, would you like to add something? This is Micah here speaking. Scott, would you like to add something? Hi, yes, Scott here. So I'm just going to piggyback on a little bit on Debbie's comments. It has been hard trying to get people to be involved in this work. People always nod and give you that, oh, yeah, sure. Once you explain the problems, they're like, oh, yeah. But the actual work that they do, they end up not ever doing any work. So, for example, here, I know many deaf prisoners who, once they're out of prison, to try to get support, they're on parole or probation and they're not provided an interpreter. In prison, they weren't provided an interpreter. They were discriminated against. So trying to find an attorney, I'm trying to make relationship with different law agencies, different law firms to try and get other lawyers. For example, those people who have filed a class action suit, we're trying to find a willing firm who will accept the case, who will accept those men who are in prison, their case. So that's one of the very big problems, we're trying to find, that we're working on. And we know that, they're in prison right now, they're suffering. I mean, and it's so frustrating for them. There's no communication. They have to deal with that every day. But in the outside world, those big firms, they're not willing to get involved because, the money is not there. It's not a big payoff for it. So, we can't win $500,000, cases. Those kind of people who do the disability work, they're really, heartfelt and sensitive to that. And that's why they're motivated to do it. The other challenge is local community volunteers. I have been, since I've been working, I've been trying to set up meetings and I've been trying to get individuals to help. I mean, countless times I've tried to get people to help. I've explained the problems, and again, they all nod and say, oh yeah, I want to help, I want to get involved. However, when it's time to do the work, they're not there. So I have a few people who are willing to get involved. However, their own jobs require a huge amount of their time and effort. So there are many challenges to our work. However, the point is today is that if you care, then you will get involved. I'm done. Okay. So again, this is TL speaking. The big picture, what's really important to understand is that the first step of the legal system is it's really unequal. Everyone has a first step. Let me back up here for just interpreter clarification. The legal system is an unequal system to begin with. Especially if you are a deaf, disabled, or Black person, all those issues, the legal system is not it does not begin in the courtroom. There are many steps prior to that. The paperwork, all of that, then you lead to school. The school system leads to prison right now. If you are identified as a deaf person, so that means we tend to punish people, the deaf, disabled, students of color, low income, instead of providing them mental health or resources, all those different things, we tend to just punish them. And all of that leads to the prison system. So it's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. So by the time you get to court, then you don't have access at all. then the next step is, okay, you go to court, then you go to jail. And there's no access there either. That means you can't contact an attorney. That means you can't contact your family. Then if something terrible happens, you have no one, absolutely no one. And so now that means that being in jail for a hearing person who can go back and forth with their lawyer, who can have that interaction, who can make calls, who can get information, try to figure out what the concerns are, ask family, can you please do this for me? They have access to all of that. However, the deaf individual, they don't. And so then that leads to prison. So now you get into the prison system. Again, no access to communication. If there's a problem in the first place, even sentences like English sentences and communication that way. If you ask for support, there's no video phone there, like Debbie mentioned earlier. So let me go back just a little bit related to Scott's comment. It's really hard to even get an attorney who will help. Part of the reason why is because both hearing and deaf people in prison have to go through a very complex complaint process in the prison systems. That complaint process is based in English. It relies a lot on your English writing skills. If you can't navigate through all this high level complaint procedure language, then you can't even get an attorney to even look at your case. For a hearing person in prison, if they want help and support, they can talk with their cellmates, say, hey, what'd you do about this? They can get support from other people, they can maybe make calls to people in the outside world and say, hey, can you clarify this form for me? Can you help me? But for the deaf individuals, what can they do? Nothing. That's the reason why communication itself is a barrier. So more clearly about the impact of language or the language deprivation that's happening in the prison system right now, nationwide. Deaf people, deaf-blind people, hard of hearing, they are really going insane, literally, in this system. And they're killing themselves. As a result of what? No communication. So there's a name that we often hear us heard volunteers hear, and we don't take it lightly, and it's a burden. This content is really heavy. However, it is really happening in the world. And we're like, oh, we don't care about what's going on. This is going on right now. People are really dying in our prison systems. So that's just something I'm going to put out there for you all to think about. Micah? Hi, Micah here. Wow. Thank you for sharing your experiences. That was, whoa, really important. We are going to move on to, we know that HERD has been working for 7 years trying to fight to get video phones in the prison systems and jails. But maybe some of you can talk about the video phone. Maybe Debbie, can you explain what video phones or what captioning phones, what the difference is between the two, and why if a person, they must have access to that while in prison? And after Debbie speaks, then we'll go to TL and then Scott to share some of his experiences. Debbie?
Perfect, yes. Micah, you mentioned the video phone. The video phone. it can be here. I could have one, and with a screen, I can sign through that screen. It looks like, a TV set with a camera, and it can be recorded. And on the other end, it'll be the same. Another screen where a person can see me doing my communication and signing. So we both are being videotaped, not videotaped, but we can see each other and have back and forth conversation. TL mentioned the language access. That's what that is, being able to express themselves, me being able to express myself in my language. Some of the deaf have grown up, without signing, but can write and can type. And they use captioning for the phone calls. It's really like using a TTY. In that captioning, the text rolls across the screen. And on the other side, hopefully that person has the same type of machine where they can communicate via text back and forth, where they can see the text. And that is their communication. Some people don't have access to a TTY, and they contact someone through a relay service where they call, they place a call, they dial a special number, and they place a call. And that person provides a service, a lot like an operator would. And they would have the same machine that the deaf individual has, and they would read that text aloud, verbally. So it's like a third person call. So that person is typing out the text, that operator is reading the text to the hearing individual, and that hearing individual will get the message and reply. And it's a back and forth in that way. Now, some deaf really would rather sign to communicate, but the prison system is so behind as far as technology and even awareness. They are extremely behind. So we have to educate, and we have to go in and explain these processes. And making change is difficult because they're like an old machine. They're used to the old machine, the TTYs. Some of those individuals, writing English is not their first language. So they attempt to use these machines and often have problems in communications, a great deal of understanding. It's a garbled message most of the time. There's not clarity in this way. Mind you, these machines are old, the TTYs. And oftentimes, as they're typing out the information, it's not making sense on the other end to the hearing person. So that's a communication block. So, and some individuals who are in the prison system, they lose their hearing later. Some people, most people in prisons, they tend to lose their faculties, lose their health. Not having communication access causes them to lose their faculties in prison because, they often forget the signs. They don't have their family bonds, and that's a big issue. We also have the TTYs with VCO, which means the deaf person can speak on the phone and they would speak to the hearing person, but they would get back to them through the operator. TL's called a hold. One moment. TL is informing the interpreter missed something. Okay, so let's go back and get that. Let's fix that. Okay. I was done, so I can go on and pass it to the next person. The voicer? Hello? The interpreter? We can't hear the interpreter? Can you hear me? Hello? The interpreter's here? Can you hear my voice? Hello? Can anyone hear the interpreter? Hello?
Fine now.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm sorry. That's a technical issue there. Scott? Okay, I think that we're getting ready to run out of time. Do you mind if there's anything that you really want to share in closing?
Yes, this is
Ms.
Micah here. We will move on so that we can wrap up. The last question that we have is how can we provide and what can we do to support, how can HERD support both locally and nationally on the national level for our deaf people, for our deaf and disabled people in prison. Right now, HERD is the only organization doing this type of work. So how can we provide more support? Hold on. Okay, Sean, Scott, are you answering? Okay, yes, hi. I would like to emphasize one thing to all of the attendees here tonight. Really, the easiest thing we can do is to start making calls. Hold on, please. Okay, there we go. You can begin by making calls. Well, let me back up just a little bit. On the internet, you can Google or Yahoo or whichever search engine you use. You can find a list of state prisons, a whole listing on there. And then you can write down their numbers. After you do that, also, you can, where in the area where you live specifically, you can find out how many jails or work release programs or transition centers, detention centers. You can find out how many of those you have within a 100-mile radius of where you live. Get those names, get those phone numbers. When you have those two lists, begin making phone calls. Ask them, what are your policies that you have for deaf and hard of hearing people? Do you have a video phone? Do you get interpreters for your people? Do you have deaf volunteers that come to your facilities? Do you have deaf prisoners? Also, you can make what's called a, let me think. TL, what is that information request? Oh, the FOIA. You can make a FOIA request. And that means that you can ask the prison or the jail if they have a deaf or hard of hearing inmate there. They are supposed to honestly answer that question. So really simple things that you can do. Plus, you can call your state Department of Corrections and ask them to schedule a meeting with them. The secretary is not the person that documents or records or keeps computer records. Not that person. They're a really high-level person in the state. So ask for a meeting with them. and then discuss and explain and try to educate them, and advocate for those deaf and hard of hearing inmates. Find that out. Also, you can take the time, ask community members. Say, hey, are you aware of any former inmates that are out now that need any support? Or do you know anyone in prison currently? Our deaf interpreting community is very small. It's nothing to contact each other. If you have a Facebook page or Twitter account or Instagram account, you can easily find people. Just post one message and say, hey, everyone, I'm just curious. I'm doing some volunteer work. If you don't mind sharing your knowledge about individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing in prison or who are now out in the community who need that support. Or you can ask your local community agencies if there is any prisons or local jails that have a VP or that use interpreters. People are they tend to respond. So that's it for now. So I'm gonna hand it over to either Debbie or TL. Debbie? Debbie.
Hello, yes, this is Debbie. Before you decide to contact the prisons or the jails, please take the chance to educate yourself and your community. Get together, learn more about the prison system in your area and how it works. Remember, anytime we contact a deaf, blind, deaf person in any way, anytime we contact them, they will always copy our conversation. So we need to be careful about, getting their information about their case. It's best not to do that. It's best to wait. Ask them how they're doing. If they want to share, that's fine. Let them know our conversation is going to be recorded. Same with email. Let them know that. That's something that's important for an inmate to know. I make sure that I can see and understand this person or read and communicate in text with that person. It's going to be frustrating for that person to have to repeat their information. So we have to keep in mind and be careful that we must understand the system or their level before we go in. Sometimes the system will retaliate. So it's important that we, as a group, we're serious and we learn the system we're dealing with and then truly unpack and then get active and do the work. TL? TL here, and I'll keep it brief. Our time is dwindling. So I wanted to say, I really hope people I want people to do something. I don't want people to just not do anything. Let me go back. I want to tell you what I don't want people to do. I'm noticing, and this is bad. For example, oftentimes the national deaf organizations, they would go out and put in they want to fight for reforms. And they do things that tend to hurt people. Instead of doing that, ask people who themselves are working on the ground, doing the grassroots, who are working in the community and impacting individuals. Often, I've consistently noticed hearing people taking privileges. Oh, I'm going to interpret for you. I'm going to do these things for you. If we have a prison system with deaf people working in the prison system, they can support and educate the deaf there. Right now, people are so busy asking for interpreters, they're not asking that we hire deaf people to advocate, deaf people to work with them, that one-on-one communication. That's one thing that I've been noticing. it's been a hearing-centered model of support. You know, why are we using all these hearing people to do this work when we can put deaf people in position to really be essential in these individuals' lives? Lastly, related to transformative equality.
Oh, justice.
Again. Transformative justice. It's important that we include our community with a community approach. Now, we need to figure out ways of developing solutions in our communities, how to develop ourselves, how to support ourselves, instead of relying on the state. The state is not set up for us. And that's the truth. And it's important that we know to continue to rely on the state. But we can't rely on the state of persons that are being abused by the system itself. That's really important. I just wanted to make sure that was known. You know, I know I've got lots of ideas and notes that I want to share, but I guess I'll save them for later for part 2 here. Micah?
Yes, Micah here again. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge and ideas and experience. For our audience, we would like to let you know that we do have a documentary. If you just type in Deaf in Prisons, you can YouTube that, and you will be able to find different videos to watch. Also, you can follow some of our hashtags, which is hashtag heard webinar, hashtag deaf in prison, hashtag disability solitary. I'm sorry, I'm not. Disability solidarity. Okay, so if you can see those hashtags in our chat room. Also, you can follow us and get more information about our next webinar, about our next presenters, what's going on with us, what's going on in our community. So please consider donating if you can. Thank you to all of our panelists, to TL, Scott, and Debbie, our interpreters, Jackie and Toy, our captioner, Lorraine. Thank you again, everyone, for your attendance. I will also have this video of tonight's webinar, not tonight, however, but it will be up soon. Our next webinar will be April 29th, is that right? It's the last Tuesday of April from 7 to 8 at night. Great, thank you. Great job, Micah. See you soon.